Hello everyone. Welcome to Thursday. It's time for your video challenge. I'm Evan Abrams, and today we're going to be creating some chill meditative loops, chill vibes only here on this video challenge. I know for most of the week, challenges have been challenging indeed, so today we're going to slow it down a little bit and hopefully get into some concepts, some ideas that will help you also create some very chill graphics out there. Like I said, I'm Evan Abrams. I want to say thanks everyone for hanging out. Great to see you out there. Everybody, Umacord, Steve, Oliver, Anki, Clever Devlin, hello. Steve, what's going on? Laura, our mod Sam, holding it down in the chat. But yeah, let me know where you're from. Let me know what you're doing. Sorry, I'm not wearing my tie-dye shirt. That's right, but I tried to find the brighter of my ensemble. We have some lemons and flowers here. When life gives you lemons, just eat them. So, what are we making today? What are we going to do? Well, let's have a look at the old screen and have a little peruse of this wonderful little loop here. It's very abstracted, a lot of shapes, a lot of colors, a lot of gradients. If you want to get your hands on this particular file that we're looking at right now, just as it is, links are right there. Links in the chat, links in the description. And if you make something of your own, if you create something out of what we talk about here today, I want to see it. I want to see it in our Discord. Come and post it up in the Premiere Discord so we can have a look at them tomorrow. We're going to be looking at everybody's submissions tomorrow so we can enjoy those. So this is what we're making. This kind of undulating, back and forth, looping element. And in particular, what we're going to be talking about sort of in a lot of detail is constructing the background elements that are happening behind. We're going to talk about how we create this sort of progress bar type of thing right here. We'll look at how it's done technically, we'll style it up, and then we'll talk quite a bit throughout this about looping methods. So methods that can get things, oscillating, undulating, but always doing it in a repeated pattern. So let's start at the beginning. Let's go ahead and make a nice, fresh, new one of these. And we're just going to go over here. New composition, hidden under my face. But you can go create a new one in the menus. And we're going to go with social media portrait, 720 by 1280. Of course, if we want people to chill out, the place they should chill out the most is probably on various social medias. And so in here, let's start with the background. Now, you would think, well, let's make some blue things. Let's use some of our, maybe we would use like the, let's see, I'll make a new solid. I'll make it the comp size, and maybe we'll just deploy on here a gradient, maybe the 4-color gradient that comes out on here. And maybe we would undulate these around, right? And as you can see, these have interesting interactions when those get close to each other. But when we're thinking about loops, we're thinking about repeating things, this can be a little bit cumbersome to deal with. What I'd like to do is to make one thing. I want to make one element and then have that element, back here at comp 2, and have that element be repeated many times in many permutations so I can make once, duplicate many. So we are going to come in here. I'm going to create using my ellipse tool. Going to double click on that to produce. It'll produce an ellipse that is the same size and shape of our canvas here. Scale that down to nothing and then scale it back up. And now I've got a circle. That's Evan's quick circle tip. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start working entirely tonally. So I'm just going to create a nice kind of white circle out here. Pure energy. Wonderful. And I'm going to animate this moving in some way. So I'm going to call up the position. We're going to set a little keyframe. And let's see. This needs to loop. So we need to pick an ending time. And I'm going to go with 16 seconds. Set a keyframe there. And I want these two to be the same. So I'll just maybe select both of them and we'll drag it down to the corner. This will be exactly like the thing that you see in the example file, right? And in the middle here, let's go to around 8 seconds. I'm going to drag this element to be up here in the corner. Now you can see that by dragging this around and setting these keyframes, right, you click the stopwatch, it creates keyframes on a property, and then since it's position, we can now enjoy this motion path that's hanging out. Now I don't want a straight line. I'm going to come up here and grab the Convert Vertex tool. I'm going to click. It's hard to see, but you better believe there is a little keyframe in there, and I'm going to drag these handles like so, right? And you see, as you drag one of them, sometimes the other one comes with it. That's totally fine. You know that if you drag this one, and then you drag this one, they break. You can also hold down Option. You can, and that'll maybe link them together, and then taking Option off, it'll go like this. So you've got lots of options for things to hold and change how these are going. And so you can see that this is now arcing up and then arcing back down. Now, these are linear keyframes, and linear keyframes, sort of by design, as nice as they are not particularly chill. They kind of just bounce off. So I'm going to grab these, right-click Keyframe Assistant, and I'm going to easy ease them. So now we've got this nice eased movement of this one element moving around, slowly moving through the world. All right, so far so good. Now, what I'd like to do is to have this keep happening, right? And I want it to be, let's see, which to tackle first. You know what? Let's deal with getting many of them first. So the easiest way to do that is to select this element, Command-Shift-C, and let's call this the moving orb, right? And hit OK on that. And now we've created a little nested composition here that is just this. So if I want more of it, I can duplicate it, and maybe I'll rotate that around. So now I've got two, whoosh, whoosh, passing in the night here. Let's go ahead and maybe duplicate them again, and right-click on them, and go to Transform, and let's say flip vertically, like so. And now I've got four of them going, right? They're all going to go whoosh, whoosh. It's already quite interesting. And what I'd like to do with them, right now they're all happening at the same time, which is fine, but what I want to do is have it be more chaotic back there. So I'm going to offset them in time. I'm just going to start dragging these and sort of pulling them, you know, whichever way I so choose, kind of brushing them around. And so if we observe how that's going to go, oh, they're just kind of undulating around back there. Now, unfortunately, because they have keyframes, they kind of stop and they come to rest. If I want the start and the end of this to look exactly the same, right, for all of this 16 seconds, remember that these keyframes last for all of 16 seconds. I'm going to hold down Option, I'm going to click on this, and we're going to type in loop out, and inside its arguments, inside these parentheses, in quotation marks, I'm going to choose cycle from this. Now, we don't have to say cycle. It's going to assume cycle as the default, but it's nice for educational purposes today to know that we are cycling. And that means it's going to keep repeating this forever, for all time and all space. As soon as it's done, we're going to loop out this keyframe, so this property will then simply do it again, like that. Now what that means is when we come back here, we've got these layers that we can slide forward and backwards, and it's just constantly repeating that same 16-second movement. And because the whole duration of this thing is 16 seconds, that means that we're free to basically slide this however we want. So a 16-second thing, if looping slid within a 16-second thing, is going to appear infinite, and we can, you know, get this thing kind of juggling through, which I think is pretty cool. I think that's pretty interesting. It's kind of like staring at the ocean. It's chaos, but it's all fine. And maybe that's something to remember. Things may seem chaotic, but it's fine. So here, I'm not totally sold that these should remain as this. So I'm going to create a new, we're going to create a new adjustment layer over top of them. And what we're going to do is apply to this something like a fast box blur. You could use all kinds of blurs, but fast box blur being the fastest of them. We're going to then kind of blow them out like this. So now this has turned into kind of an undulating gradient of these things swarming around. Now, the next thing that I want to do in here is let's get them to be sort of different colors, right? So for this, I'm going to lean on my old friend Colorama. So if we drop Colorama down on this thing, you can see what that is doing. It's attempting to sort of remap our inputs and outputs, right? Well, one thing that I really want to do is make a new solid underneath them, because these areas that have no information are not helping us out. So let's go ahead and pull this below them. And so basically, instead of those being pixels with no information, they're actually pixels with black information in them. And now we've got this happening. It's getting a little bit better, right? So now we're going to come into here. We're going to come into this output cycle, and I'm going to change this to, say, solarize blue, maybe. Let's see how that's looking. It's looking pretty good, I would think. Let's just add some more knots in here, right? So an important thing to know about Colorama, up here at the tippity top, this is where you're going to find the darkest and lightest of values. So maybe let's come into here, and maybe we'll grab sort of like a pink like that to pinch up here at the top, right? And right now, we're not going to see a lot of that. Well, we can probably improve our lives by changing these to add maybe, but that won't matter because, you know, as they collide with each other, remember they're being blurred out by this fast box blur up here. So you might want to blur the individual elements themselves if you want more interactions. I'm actually going to put in a curves, deploy a curves in between here, and so that we can actually kind of push this value up if we want. You can come into the alpha, and maybe you want to adjust those up and down. But if we come into the RGB and we give that just a bit of a push, like so, and that's going to hopefully give us a little bit more stuff going on. All right. So there's all kinds of alterations that you can be doing with what's happening back here. For example, let's come back into the Colorama, and we're going to add, let's just add a couple more knots down here. So maybe we'll push this a little bit more like that, and let's give this one here maybe something a little bit more in the reds spectrum on this side, right? Something like that. Ooh, let's see. How can we go something like this? So we're getting a little bit more different colors coming in. There we go. Now, you might come back and say, hey, what we need to do is actually fast box blur that down again, because you might start to experience a little bit of sort of crunchiness in between, but I think this is kind of working out. And something else that I want to say, we're going to be rendering this bad boy off and sending it out to social media, right? When you render things, especially things with gradients, you might experience banding, and that is why I'm going to deploy a noise HLS over top of this. And noise is really great because it comes in and it just breaks stuff up, right? It's going to basically break up all of our banding. And what we want to do is just balance out between sort of banding and our sort of demands on fidelity with this. So depending on how much of that we want to do, this is going to be up to you. And again, right, we might even be putting another curves over top of this, right? And we'll say like, hey, let's actually just bring that stuff down kind of like this. So we'll just bring that down a little bit like so. We're using the curves to kind of refine and define how we want this to kind of go. There we go. That's looking nice for me. All right. So now we need that kind of track, right, that we're going to see, so that if people are going to try to breathe along with this, they're going to go through the motions. So we want some kind of little widget out here that'll serve as kind of like a loading bar. I'm going to double click on our rectangle tool here. Let's make it around this size, perhaps. Let's go maybe 300. Let's give it quite a bit of a stroke around it, and let's remove the fill from it. So I'm going to go ahead and let's make this totally white. Let's make this nice and thick, nice and sort of, we would say, readable, like so. And then let's just tilt it a little bit like that. Now, these hard edges, ooh-wee, hard edges are probably not what we want to have. Let's round those off. So we're going to come into the stroke, and we're going to come in here, and we're going to say round cap, round joint. All right, so we've got this element. Now, the next thing that I want to be doing here, hey, Annika, didn't see you come in there. How you doing? So the next thing we want to do, we want a little progress to go through here. So let's call this the track. Well, we'll just rename our layers. Renaming layers is fun and good. I'll duplicate that and we'll call this the progress. Now, the progress that we want to bring in here, I'm going to go ahead and make this like a 50% gray color, and we're going to bring in our old friend trim paths into the mix. So trim paths is going to help me to basically have this thing draw on. And I want to go one side at a time all the way around. So let's start at like 0.01. So there is a little bit of a blip on there. And we'll set a keyframe. And I'm going to just move in on our timeline so that we can experience, get a little bit closer to this thing. And at 2 seconds, let's say at 2 seconds, we want to be at 25%, right? And then let's see, at 4 seconds, probably let's stay there for that, because then we want this to repeat the process and keep moving forward, right? So I'm going to ease these, select them all, hit F9, and we are going to right-click on this, and we're going to say loop out. And the type of looping out that we want this to do is not continue, because that would continue the last keyframe. We are going to say offset. And so the offset is going to then add to the end of this. So look at this. It's just going to keep on going. It's going to hang out for a bit, and then it's going to move. It's going to hang out for a bit, and then it's going to move. And it's going to just keep repeating this change of value over and over again. Now, we're going to do a very similar thing here to the start, because we want the start to hang out, and then we want the start to kind of start to catch up. It's going to catch up to our friend here. So that's going to be what? That's going to be 24.99 or something like that, right? And so we'll deploy the loop out offset to this. And so now we'll have this little buddy kind of crawl its way across, going through the world here as it colors up one side and kind of just keeps going around, just keeps going through. Very critical for things to just keep rolling on through. But this offset is allowing us to sort of add to the end, not cycling, not ping-ponging, just adding, continuing and repeating the process. So wonderful. We've got our progress bar kind of walking its way around. Now, I might actually rotate that so it starts and ends at the top. So hopefully that's going to be perfectly good. And I want to style this up in some way. So I'm going to take our progress bar here, and I've made it 50% gray for a pretty good reason. That is because I'm going to be deploying onto this a bevel alpha. Now, there's many ways to bevel your layers. I like using effects myself. The bevel alpha, as you can see, is beveling the alpha, but it does kind of a, let's say, a crunchy job of it. But being 50% gray, we get the neutral tones, then we get the darks, and we get the highlights as well. I'm going to come in here and bring in our old friend, Fast Box Blur, right? Box Blur, there we go, Fast Box Blur, bring that out. And if we were to blur the whole thing, it gets so blurry, right? It gets so blurry, it kind of disappears. So what I'm going to do is, to this thing, I'm going to clamp it down using a set matte effect. So I'm going to deploy the set matte effect onto this. And by default, it takes the matte, the alpha information of the original layer before any effects have been deployed on it. And that allows me to have this kind of soft bean, I guess we'll call it, this wonderful soft bean hanging out on here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab CC Toner and deploy CC Toner on top of this. And this is what's going to help me sort of recolor the particular highlights. So in the highlights section, maybe we do like a soft, very soft kind of pink up there. And maybe in the shadows, what we're going to do is something like a darker blue down there. And the mids, things that are incredibly mid like myself, we're going to grab like a blue like that. And so now you can see that trucking its way across, right? So that's going places. Now, we might even expand this. Maybe we bring this up to like a 61 or a 62, just so that it kind of overlaps fully with the layer below it. I like the way this technique kind of has a little bit of a weird glow around it, but hey, I'm always happy to add more weird glow around things. So we'll just grab the stylized glow and deploy that on the outside. The glow radius should be quite a bit large, right? I don't want it to be not a harsh glow. And I'm going to bring the glow threshold down quite a bit, maybe into like the 20s. So that really it's only the most highlighty parts of this that are going to get that glow happening. So I hope that kind of makes sense. Use the schmear preset. Yeah, well, it's I mean, there's a lot of there's a lot of great presets in here to explore. I kind of skipped out on breakfast, so now you're making me hungry there, Mike. So there we go. We've got this kind of a metallic object kind of moving through. Now, we can keyframe all kinds of things. In fact, I'm going to keyframe our midtones here, right? And our midtones, I'm going to say, hey, at the 8-second mark, let's say, around the 8-second mark, let's move from a blue into much more of like a purple, right? Let's go like that. And you can see here that keyframe property and how it is changing as it goes through. Now, here, why don't we go ahead and loop this out, and let's use the ping pong method on this, right? So that means that by the time we get back up to the top, we've ping ponged it back to that color. Let's ease those. Everything should be eased and chill. So we can go like that. Or you might even say, hey, let's bump this down, and so that we're going purple in this corner, blue in this corner, purple in this corner, blue in this corner, and it repeats. Now, there's one final thing before I leave you, before we really bounce on out of here, about loops and about when we go to render this off specifically. So there are, of course, a couple of other techniques. We might want to put in some kind of breathing type motion. In the original example file, I use some echo and I use some scale to bring that together. Download the example file, explore that, enjoy it, love it. But the last kind of critical piece of this, or maybe two pieces of this that are critical, are when we go to render this out, notice that the last frame, 16:00, and the first frame, 0:00, are all exactly the same, right? These are both identical frames. We don't want to render both of them. We want to go one step back and then hit N to trim our work area here. So from A to A again, right, would be both frames, 00 and 16:00. But what we want is one frame less, because frame 16 at 16 seconds and frame 0 are exactly the same. So we remove one frame and we render that, knowing that that will produce a smooth movement through the whole thing. Because dovetailing, what would be 16 and 16 minus 1, right? 16 minus 1 will abut frame 0 because 16 and 0 are the same. Now, obviously, this is some metaphysical stuff. I don't want to blow anybody's brains with this. Don't keep your minds firmly inside your head, but that is sort of the thing. A 16-second loop, right? The last and the first are the same. So time is a flat circle. At least here it is. And hopefully that is helpful. If you want to have a kind of subtle breathing to this, what I'm going to do is produce a new null. I'm going to grab the track and the progress, parent both of them to the null. And again, we'll use one of those techniques. We'll just use scale here to scale this up. Let's bring this sort of large here at 8, maybe just to 110. And then we'll bring it. Those are the two changes. Maybe it'll go from 90 to 110. Let's ease those. And of course, we can come in here. We can say, hey, loop that out. We want to loop it out how? We want to loop it out ping-ponging. And so you would want to say, oh, do I want the kind of loop period for that to be at the 8s? Do I want that to be at the 4s? It's totally up to you what you want to do with that. Just remember that in any kind of looping piece, especially like this, the periods and the frequencies are all critical to it. So we are at 16 seconds. That means we want to basically bring everything back to the exact same frame at 16. So you could do things that loop on the 8. You could do things that loop on 4, things that loop on 2, things that loop on 1. Just find all of the various factors of your total duration. A little bit of maths for you. Cannot escape maths when I'm here on the program. So you'll figure out the factors of that will resolve back to their original state by the end, and that will be the way that you can include many different looping things. And speaking of including many looping things, we want to see what you make. I want to see the loops that you're going to create. We're going to be looking at everything people have made on these video challenges throughout the week. So come back tomorrow. We're going to be exploring things that you have done, the great community out there watching this stuff. So we're going to be observing all of that tomorrow. That's going to be our little update on video challenges throughout the week. I see there's a lot of great stuff in the Discord, so make sure that you join us in the Discord. Make sure that you subscribe to us wherever you're watching this. If you're seeing us on Behance, if you're seeing us on YouTube, make sure that you are subscribing to us there so that you'll get notified whenever we're doing things. All right, that'll be it for me. I'm Evan Abrams. I'll see you tomorrow, 1 o'clock Eastern time. Until then, stay creative, be kind to each other, and I'll see you around the internet. Bye for now.